I found a GPS tracker under my Silverado while changing oil at my lakefront place in Texas. Professional installation. Still warm, meaning someone had just put it there. At 62 years old, why would anyone need to track me? To find the truth, I mailed that tracker to Oklahoma. I didn't tell anyone. I just waited, watched, listened. 12 hours later, my son's phone started ringing nonstop. His face went white, and that's when I knew who'd put it there. My name is Wesley Palmer, and before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment below. Where are you watching this from? And what time is it there right now? I want to know how far this story is reaching. The Saturday morning oil change was a ritual I'd kept for 30 years, ever since my wife Sarah taught me how to maintain our first truck together. She'd been gone 4 years now, cancer taking her just like it tried to take our daughter-in-law Madison last year. Sarah always said, "Wesley, when you can't trust the people at the garage, you better learn to trust yourself." Smart woman. I still heard her voice every time I slid under that Silverado. Same time, same routine. Roll out the creeper, position the drain pan, check the oil filter. My back complained more than it used to. Too many years swinging hammers as a construction foreman, but I could still do the work myself. Always had, always would. That's when my calloused hand hit something that shouldn't have been there. I stopped mid-reach. My fingers, trained by 25 years of finding problems on construction sites, felt around the undercarriage again, this time paying real attention. Metal, smooth and foreign, definitely not part of the truck. I grabbed my old mag light from the toolbox and rolled back under. The beam caught it immediately. A black box about the size of a deck of cards, magnetically attached to the frame behind the rear differential. A tiny LED blinked red in the Texas darkness like an electronic heartbeat. Professional installation, not some quick stick-and-run job. Industrial-grade magnet, weatherproof casing. This wasn't some cheap gadget from Amazon. I'd supervised electrical crews for decades. I knew equipment. This was expensive. Maybe $200, maybe more. And it was still warm to the touch. Not warm from the October sun. It was barely 65 degrees out here this morning. Warm from recent use, from active transmission. Someone had installed this thing recently. Very recently. Maybe while I was at Preston's place yesterday playing poker and drinking beer like we did every Friday night. Someone had been in my garage, under my truck, attaching surveillance equipment to my personal vehicle. My hand started shaking, and it wasn't from the cool morning air. I didn't rip it off. That would have been stupid, and Sarah hadn't raised no stupid man. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started documenting. Photos from every angle, close-ups of the serial number stamped on the side, wide shots showing exactly where it was mounted. I documented everything the way I'd been trained to document safety violations and equipment failures, thoroughly, methodically, cover your ass complete. 23 pictures later, I grabbed a paper towel from my workbench, carefully wiped my prints off the device, and removed it. The magnet released with a soft metallic click that sounded loud as a gunshot in the quiet garage. I wrapped it in a Ziploc bag like it was evidence, which I was starting to realize it probably was. Carrying it inside, I left the oil change half-finished. My Silverado could wait. This couldn't. At my kitchen table, the same table where Sarah and I had planned our retirement, where we'd discussed her treatment options, where I'd sat alone after her funeral, I stared at the thing through the clear plastic. GPS tracker. Had to be. But who would put a tracker on a 62-year-old man's truck, and why? I ran through the possibilities. Only 3 people had been in my garage this past week, people with both access and opportunity. Preston Miller, my fishing buddy from 2 properties down, 67 years old, barely knew how to use the GPS in his boat, let alone install professional surveillance equipment. The propane delivery guy who'd topped off my tank on Monday, stranger, no reason to track a random customer, probably couldn't even pick me out of a lineup. And Garrett, my son Garrett, who'd stopped by Tuesday afternoon supposedly to check on the boat motor. Said he was being helpful, making sure his old man's equipment was running right for fishing season. Except Garrett had never cared about that boat motor, not once in the 20 years I'd owned it. And checking a boat motor sure as hell doesn't require 15 minutes alone in the garage where my truck was parked. The realization hit me like a load of bricks falling off a scaffold. My construction brain, trained to spot problems before they became disasters, started putting pieces together. The warmth of the device meant it was active, transmitting location data to someone's phone or computer. Someone was watching where I went, when I left, when I came home. Someone who had physical access to my garage, technical knowledge to install professional equipment, and reasons I couldn't yet understand to track my every movement. I looked at my phone, at Garrett's contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button, muscle memory from years of father-son conversations. But something stopped me. Sarah's voice again, from one of our last conversations before the cancer took her. "Wesley, that boy's changed since Madison got sick. He's carrying weight he won't talk about. Watch him close." I'd thought she meant grief, stress from his wife's illness. Now I wondered if she'd seen something else, something I'd missed. I opened the drawer in my kitchen desk and dropped the Ziploc bag inside, next to Sarah's old reading glasses and a stack of unpaid medical bills from Madison's treatment. The tracker would stay there while I figured out my next move. The truck would stay in the garage. I wouldn't drive anywhere, and I'd wait to see who asked questions. If someone was tracking me, they were about to get very confused about why I'd suddenly stopped moving. I closed the drawer and looked out the window at my quiet lakefront property. 3 people had keys to my garage. Only one of them knew trucks well enough to install professional surveillance equipment without leaving obvious signs: my son. But this wasn't the Garrett I'd raised. The boy who'd sat on my shoulders at construction sites, who'd learned to tie knots with rope I'd brought home from work. The teenager who'd helped me rebuild the engine on my first Chevy, grease under his fingernails, asking 100 questions about compression ratios and timing chains. That Garrett had been curious, honest, maybe a little too trusting for his own good. He'd married Madison young, started a family, seemed happy working his warehouse supervisor job. Nothing flashy, but steady work, good benefits. The kind of life Sarah and I had built together. Then Madison got sick 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer, stage 3. The treatments were experimental, expensive, mostly not covered by insurance. I'd offered to help with the bills, but Garrett had that stubborn Palmer pride. "We'll handle it, Dad. We don't want to be a burden." I should have insisted. Should have seen the signs when Garrett started looking tired, when his visits became shorter, more tense, when Madison lost her hair and her job, when their smiles looked forced and their conversations turned to whispers. Sarah would have seen it. Sarah had always been better at reading people's pain. I didn't call Garrett, didn't confront him. 25 years of construction work had taught me something valuable. Never jump to conclusions without data. Test your hypothesis first. Observe the system under stress. See what breaks when you apply pressure. Sunday morning came quiet and cool. I fed the bass in my dock's fish feeders, something Sarah had started doing to attract bigger fish for our evening fishing sessions. The routine felt hollow without her commentary about which fish looked healthiest, which ones were getting fat and lazy. I repaired a loose board on the boat lift, cleaned the garage, organized tools that were already organized. Normal weekend maintenance, the kind of work that kept a property running smooth. The Silverado sat untouched in the garage. The tracker sat silent in my desk drawer. My phone never rang. Monday brought the same routine. I stayed close to the house, finding projects that needed attention. Fixed the wobbly deck railing that Sarah had complained about for months before she died. Organized the tool shed according to her old filing system. Everything labeled, everything in its place. Made a pot of chili that would last me the week, using her recipe with extra jalapenos the way she liked it. Still no reason to drive. The truck stayed parked. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Garrett's name on the display, along with a photo I'd taken of him and Madison at last year's 4th of July barbecue, before the cancer diagnosis, when their smiles still reached their eyes. "Hey, Dad, just checking in." His voice carried that forced, casual tone people use when they're trying too hard to sound normal. Like when he was 16 and had wrecked my truck but was hoping I wouldn't notice the new dent in the front bumper. "I'm fine," I said, settling into Sarah's old chair by the kitchen window. "Good. No reason to call, really. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Your truck running all right?" There it was. Not "how's your health?" or "how are you handling Mom being gone?" He asked about the truck. The specificity of the question sent ice water through my veins. "Actually, I'm having transmission trouble," I said, watching a blue heron hunt in the shallows near my dock. "Keeping it in the garage for now." His voice shifted immediately, got tighter, more urgent. "What's wrong exactly? What kind of transmission trouble? Where are you planning to take it? How long do you think the repairs will take?" 4 questions in maybe 10 seconds. That wasn't concern about my transportation needs. That was panic. Barely controlled, like when a crane operator loses hydraulic pressure and knows the load is about to drop. Just some slipping between second and third gear. Probably needs new fluid, maybe a filter. I'll get to it when I get to it. I kept my voice steady, conversational. Why are you asking so many questions about my truck, son? Silence on his end. Complete silence for maybe 15 seconds, which felt like 15 minutes. Then, I just want to make sure you're safe, Dad. At your age, being stranded somewhere could be dangerous. I'm 62, Garrett, not 92, and I've got Preston next door if I need anything. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking worse than they had in the garage yesterday morning. Garrett didn't call to check on his old man's health or emotional state. He called to check on the truck's location, which meant he was monitoring it somehow, which meant he knew the GPS signal had gone dead, and that terrified him. Tuesday morning, I was cleaning the bass I'd caught at dawn when my phone rang again. The fish had been biting good in the cool October water, reminding me of countless mornings when Sarah would sit on the dock with her coffee, reading mystery novels while I fished. She'd look up occasionally to comment on my technique or laugh at my stories about the one that got away. Dad. Hey. Garrett's voice sounded breathless, like he'd been running. I was thinking maybe I could drive over this weekend, spend some time at the lake. I set down my fillet knife and wiped my hands on the towel Sarah had embroidered with bass and bluegill. Sure, I said, but the truck's still not fixed. You're absolutely certain it's just the transmission? His voice climbed half an octave, the same way it used to when he was 12 and lying about breaking something in the garage. Nothing else wrong with the truck? No electrical problems or anything like that? I stopped mid-motion, fish scales still clinging to my fingers. That question was too specific, too technical, like he knew exactly what kind of electrical problem might be missing from my truck. What else would be wrong with it? I asked carefully. He stammered, searching for words. I don't know, just making sure. Old vehicles can have multiple problems, you know? Electrical systems, computer stuff, GPS systems acting up. GPS systems. He actually said GPS systems. It's fine, Garrett, just the transmission slipping. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at Sarah's coffee mug still sitting in the dish drainer. I hadn't been able to put it away since the funeral. Some mornings I'd catch myself making 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then remember she wasn't coming back to drink the second one. 2 calls in 3 days. Garrett normally called once a month, usually when Madison reminded him to check on the old man. Both calls had focused on the truck's condition. Not my health, not my emotional state after losing Sarah, not whether I needed help around the property. The truck. I opened the desk drawer and looked at the Ziploc bag. The tracker's LED still blinked red through the plastic, patient and persistent as a heartbeat. My construction brain started connecting patterns the way it used to identify structural problems before they became catastrophic failures. 6 months ago, Garrett had insisted on setting up Wi-Fi at the house. Dad, you need to get with the times. This'll help you stay connected. Maybe do some video calls with us. He'd spent 3 hours configuring everything, said he wanted to make sure the security was set up right. 3 months ago, when my laptop started running slow, Garrett had volunteered to fix it. Spent 90 minutes alone with the machine, installing updates and security patches. I'd been grateful for the help, impressed that my warehouse supervisor's son knew so much about computers. Now I was wondering what else he'd installed during those helpful visits. This wasn't random. This was systematic preparation. Garrett hadn't been helping his old man get modern. He'd been setting up surveillance infrastructure. But why? What could possibly make him think he needed to spy on his own father? Tuesday night, I sat in the dark living room where Sarah and I used to watch the news together and thought about my son. About the boy who'd helped me frame the addition on this house when he was 16. Who'd insisted on learning to use every tool properly before I'd let him near the power equipment. That boy had grown up to be a man who'd apparently decided his father couldn't be trusted with privacy. If Garrett was desperate enough to install tracking devices on my truck, there had to be a reason. Something that made him willing to lie to me, to spy on me, to violate every principle of trust Sarah and I had tried to teach him. I needed to know how far this surveillance went and what he planned to do with the information he was gathering. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Spencer Wright, long-haul trucker, Vietnam vet, and one of the most reliable men I'd ever known. If anyone could help me test my son's reaction to losing his eyes on me, it was Spencer. Spencer answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly from 30 years of diesel smoke and truck stop coffee. Wesley Palmer. Hell, boy. What's got you calling at this hour? It's 8 o'clock, Spencer. Past my bedtime. What's the trouble? I need a favor, the kind where you don't ask too many questions. Silence, then a low chuckle. Those are usually the most interesting kind. What do you need? Can you get a package to Oklahoma City for me? Small package. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal. Just needs to get there fast and disappear. How small? Size of a deck of cards. When? Tomorrow, if possible. Spencer was quiet for a moment. We'd known each other 15 years, ever since he'd helped me haul lumber for Sarah's garden shed, fixed each other's equipment, shared stories about Vietnam and construction work, been pallbearers at each other's wives' funerals. He knew I wouldn't ask unless it mattered. You in some kind of trouble, Wesley? Maybe. Or maybe I'm about to prevent some. I'll pick it up at dawn. Usual truck stop outside Austin. Spencer, I owe you. No, you don't. Just promise me you'll be careful whatever you're mixed up in. 20 minutes later, I met Spencer at the truck stop just outside Austin. The Texas morning was cool, fog still clinging to the asphalt like ghosts of yesterday's heat. His 18-wheeler sat idling in the diesel section, engine rumbling with the deep, steady rhythm that had carried him across 48 states for 3 decades. I handed him a small cardboard box, the tracker wrapped in bubble wrap and sealed with packing tape. No return address, no shipping labels, nothing that could trace back to me or him. Just an anonymous package that needed to disappear into the Oklahoma wind. What's in it? Spencer asked, turning the box over in his weathered hands. Hands that had gripped steering wheels through blizzards and desert heat. Hands that had held rifles and rice paddies 50 years ago. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal, I said, meeting his eyes. Just something that needs to get to Oklahoma City and stay there. Spencer studied my face in the harsh fluorescent light from the truck stop. We'd sat in VA waiting rooms together when Sarah was getting her treatments, comparing notes about wives fighting cancer and husbands feeling helpless. He'd been one of the few people who understood that sometimes the hardest battles happen at home, not overseas. This about your boy? He asked quietly. I nodded. Family business I need to sort out. He tucked the box behind his seat without another word. I'll call when I cross the state line. Spencer, if anyone asks, nobody's gonna ask. And if they do, I never saw you. He climbed into his cab and adjusted his mirrors. Be careful, Wesley. Family business can be the most dangerous kind. His truck pulled away north, red taillights disappearing into the morning fog. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore, then drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The waiting was the hardest part. I tried to keep busy with normal retired man activities. Fed the fish, checked the boat motor Garrett had supposedly been concerned about, made myself a sandwich I couldn't eat, kept my phone in my shirt pocket with the volume turned all the way up. 2 o'clock came and went. Nothing. 5 o'clock. Still nothing. At 7 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Spencer. Package delivered safe. Crossing back into Texas tomorrow. I typed back. Thanks. Drive safe. The real test would start now. If Garrett was monitoring the tracker, he'd just watched his father's truck make an impossible 400-mile journey north in a matter of hours. No stops for gas, no logical route, just a straight line that defied physics and common sense. 8 o'clock. I was washing dinner dishes when my phone rang, Garrett's name on the display, but this time his photo looked different to me. Not the smiling son at a family barbecue, but a stranger wearing my boy's face. Hey, Dad, how's it going? Too cheerful, like a salesman trying to hide desperation. Making dinner, I said, drying my hands on the dish towel Sarah had made from fabric scraps, back when we thought we had all the time in the world. You just checking in? I asked. Yeah. You home? Where else would I be? Right. Truck still broken? Still working on it. I kept my voice steady, conversational, like we were discussing the weather instead of my son's apparent surveillance of my daily movements. So, you're at the property, not driving anywhere? I set down the dish towel slowly. The specificity of that question told me everything I needed to know. Garrett wasn't asking out of concern for my safety. He was asking because he had technology telling him one thing and his eyes telling him another. Garrett, what's this about? Why do you keep asking where I am? Nothing. Just making sure you're okay. His voice stretched thin like wire under too much tension. Your truck running okay? No weird problems? GPS working right? There it was again. GPS. The second time he'd mentioned it specifically. I don't use the GPS much, just drive to town and back, same roads I've been using for 20 years. But it's working? The GPS system in the truck? Son, why are you so interested in my truck's GPS? I'm not. He trailed off, probably realizing how suspicious he sounded. 9 o'clock. The phone rang again. This time Garrett's voice was different, higher, tighter, barely controlled panic bleeding through. Dad, where are you? Not how are you or what are you doing? Where are you? A demand disguised as a question. I'm at home. Where I've been all day. Why are you asking? Your truck. Are you sure you're at the property? I gripped the phone tighter. Son, are you feeling all right? You're asking strange questions. In the background, I heard Madison's voice, sharp and urgent. Let me talk to him. Then muffled arguing, Garrett saying, no, I can handle this, Madison insisting, you're making it worse. Garrett, what the hell is going on over there? His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Dad, we need to talk in person. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. It's important. Really important. Don't go anywhere tonight, okay? Just stay home. I'm 62 years old, Garrett. Where would I go? But he'd already hung up. I sat in my dark kitchen, Sarah's empty chair across from me, and realized my son was terrified. He'd been tracking my movements, and now that tracking system was telling him his father had somehow traveled 400 miles in impossible time while claiming to be home with transmission trouble. That night I couldn't sleep. Something Garrett had said kept bothering me, scratching at my brain like a splinter under skin. Are you sure you're at the property? How would he know if I wasn't? The tracker was in Oklahoma, riding Spencer's truck toward Tulsa, unless there was another way he'd been watching me. At 1 a.m, I walked to my office. The room still smelled faintly of Sarah's lavender perfume, even 4 years after she'd stopped organizing my paperwork and balancing the checkbook at the desk by the window. She'd been the organized one, the detail person who caught problems before they became disasters. My laptop sat on the desk. The same machine Garrett had fixed 3 months ago when it started running slow. He'd spent 90 minutes alone with it, installing what he called security updates and performance improvements. I'd been grateful for his help, impressed that my warehouse supervisor's son knew so much about computer maintenance. Now I was wondering what else he'd maintained while he was at it. I opened the laptop and waited for it to boot up. Garrett had taught me some basic troubleshooting over the years, including how to check what programs were running in the background. Task Manager, he'd called it. Dad, if your computer's running slow, this'll show you what's eating up your resources. Ironic that he'd taught me the tool I'd need to catch him. I pressed Ctrl+Shift+Escape and watched the Task Manager window open. Most of the running processes looked familiar. Windows stuff, antivirus software, the basics. But one name stood out like a neon sign in the darkness. TeamViewer.exe. I stared at it for a full minute, my mouth going dry. I almost Googled it on the laptop, then stopped myself. If someone was watching my screen, they'd know I'd discovered their surveillance. Better to stay ignorant until I had all the facts. I closed the laptop carefully, like it might explode if I handled it wrong, and walked to my neighbor Preston's house. The porch light was off, but I knocked anyway. Small emergencies don't wait for convenient hours. Preston answered in his bathrobe and slippers, gray hair sticking up at odd angles. Wesley, what's wrong? Is it your heart? Can I use your computer? Mine's acting up. At 1 a.m? Please, Preston, it's important. He stepped aside without argument. Good neighbors understand when emergencies don't follow normal schedules, especially when the neighbor asking for help lost his wife to cancer and might be having medical problems of his own. I sat at Preston's old desktop computer, the kind with a tower and separate monitor that reminded me of office equipment from my construction days. Opened his web browser and searched for TeamViewer remote access software. The results made my hands shake worse than they had when I'd found the tracker. Remote desktop software allows someone to view your screen, access your files, and control your computer from anywhere in the world. The description continued with features that sounded like a spy's wish list: file transfer capabilities, session recording, unattended access for maintenance and monitoring. I clicked deeper into the technical specifications. TeamViewer could be installed to run automatically at startup, hidden from the user, providing complete remote access without the computer owner's knowledge. Someone with TeamViewer installed on my machine could watch every keystroke, read every document, access every file. My bank statements, my medical records, my legal documents, the deed to the property, everything. I searched for TeamViewer installed without permission legal and found forums full of people describing exactly what was happening to me. Unauthorized remote access was a federal crime under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Up to 10 years in prison for accessing a protected computer without authorization. But knowing it was illegal didn't help me figure out why my son was doing it. I dug into the installation logs, following instructions from a tech support forum. TeamViewer had been installed exactly 3 months ago, the same day Garrett had fixed my slow computer. And according to the access logs, someone had been using it regularly. Recent file access showed my bank statements, property documents, and email accounts had all been viewed when I wasn't home. Someone had been reading my entire financial life, documenting my assets, my income, my daily routines. Combined with the GPS tracking on my truck, they had a complete picture of my movements, my wealth, my vulnerabilities. I wanted to uninstall TeamViewer immediately, but that would tip them off that I'd discovered the surveillance. Better to leave it running and let them think they still had access while I figured out what to do next. I thanked Preston and walked home through the cool Texas night, past the dock where Sarah and I used to sit and watch the stars, past the boat she'd named Sarah's Dream during one of her good days between chemotherapy sessions. My son had been spying on me for months, not just tracking my location, but accessing my most private information. Bank accounts, legal documents, medical records, everything a person would need to know to either protect someone or exploit them. The question was which one Garrett had in mind. Back in my kitchen, I made a pot of coffee I wouldn't drink and sat at the table where Sarah used to pay our bills. Tracker plus spyware meant Garrett needed to know where I was and what I owned. That combination suggested planning, preparation for something specific, something that required knowing my exact location and financial situation at all times. At 2 a.m, I opened my notebook and started mapping out a timeline, the way I used to track construction project milestones for the county. Sarah had bought me this notebook for my retirement, said I'd need something to keep my organized mind busy. She'd been right, just not in the way either of us expected. 6 months ago, Garrett installs Wi-Fi and security at my house. 3 months ago, Garrett fixes my laptop, installs TeamViewer spyware. 2 weeks ago, someone attempts to file power of attorney under my name. 1 week ago, GPS tracker installed on my truck. 3 days ago, fraudulent loan application using my property. The pattern was clear. Escalating preparation. Each step more invasive, more desperate. Whatever Garrett was planning, he was running out of time. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't used in 15 years. Bryce Coleman, retired detective from Austin PD, now working private investigations. If anyone could dig into my son's life without raising flags, it was Bryce. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep and probably whiskey. This better involve blood or fire because it's 2 in the goddamn morning. Bryce, it's Wesley Palmer. Long silence, then his voice cleared immediately. Wesley, Jesus, what's wrong? Is it medical? We'd served on the volunteer fire department together back when Madison first got sick. Bryce had helped me navigate the insurance bureaucracy, made calls to specialists, used his cop connections to fast-track some of Madison's treatment approvals. He understood how cancer could destroy a family financially, as well as emotionally. I need you to look into someone, I said. My son. Another pause. Longer this time. Bryce knew I wouldn't call about family business unless it was serious. What kind of looking? Everything. Finances, who he owes money to, what kind of trouble he might be in. I think he's planning something involving my property. That's a hell of an accusation, Wesley. I found surveillance equipment on my truck. He's been accessing my computer remotely. Someone tried to forge my signature on legal documents. Bryce's voice went hard, professional. How soon do you need this? Yesterday. I think whatever's happening is about to come to a head. Give me 4 hours. And Wesley? If you're right about this, you might not like what I find. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Wesley, you sitting down? I was already sitting at my kitchen table watching the sun rise over the lake where Sarah and I had planned to spend our golden years together. Your son is drowning, Bryce said without preamble. Borrowed $85,000 from something called Lone Star Financial Services. They're not exactly a legitimate lending institution. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What do you mean, not legitimate? High-interest loan sharks operating under corporate cover, 15% monthly interest, pressure tactics, connections to organized crime. They specialize in targeting people who can't get traditional bank loans. The number hit me like a physical blow. $85,000. More than Madison's cancer treatments had cost, more than most people made in 2 years. How much time does he have? They gave him 2 weeks to come up with the full amount. That was 12 days ago. In 2 days, they'll expect payment in full or they'll start collection procedures. What kind of collection procedures? Bryce's voice went flat, cop serious. The kind that don't involve polite phone calls. Wesley, your son put your lakefront property up as collateral without your knowledge or consent. When these people don't get paid, they don't negotiate. They take what they're owed. I felt the world tilt slightly. That's impossible. The property's been paid off for 8 years. Not impossible if someone has access to your financial information and can forge your signature. According to the paperwork I found, you supposedly agreed to guarantee the loan with your property as collateral. Why would he borrow that much money? Bryce hesitated. Online sports betting. Started small, probably just trying to make some quick money to help with Madison's medical bills. But gambling addiction works like cancer. Starts small and spreads until it destroys everything healthy. I thought about Madison's treatments, the stress on their marriage, the financial pressure that would have driven a desperate man to make increasingly bad decisions. Plus, Bryce continued, Madison's medical bills from last year. Even with insurance, cancer treatment can bankrupt a family. They were already behind on everything when Garrett started gambling, instead of asking me for help. Pride's a hell of a thing, Wesley. Sometimes it kills people. Another pause. There's more you need to know. According to my source, Lone Star sent someone to evaluate the collateral yesterday. Professional assessment, taking photos, making sure the property's actually worth what they think they're owed. I looked out at my deck, my dock, the lake view that Sarah had fallen in love with 30 years ago. Someone had been watching my home, calculating its value, planning how to take it away from me. Wesley, you're in real danger. These people don't care that you didn't actually sign anything. They have paperwork that says you did, and they'll use whatever means necessary to collect. What do they usually do when people can't pay? They make the collateral available by removing obstacles. The words hung in the air like smoke. I'm the obstacle. Yes. If Garrett can't pay in 2 days, they'll come for the property, and they won't ask you nicely to sign it over. Bryce gave me 2 phone numbers before hanging up. One for the Travis County Sheriff's Department, one for a safe house in Austin if I needed to disappear quickly. I wrote them down in Sarah's careful handwriting style. She'd always said my penmanship looked like a drunk chicken had walked across the page. What should I do? I asked. Call the sheriff. Get protection. Document everything. Or... He paused. Or what? Give them what they want, but not the way they expect it. You mean turn in Garrett? With evidence. With a confession. With everything documented so clean that even a loan shark's lawyer can't argue with it. I understood what he wasn't saying directly. If Garrett was in police custody, the loan became invalid. The forged collateral documents became evidence of fraud rather than legitimate debt. Lone Star Financial would lose everything and face federal investigation, but it meant destroying my son to save myself. After I hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the grandfather clock Sarah had inherited from her mother tick away the seconds toward whatever was coming. Each tick felt like a countdown to the moment when I'd have to choose between my safety and my son's freedom. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. I wasn't running, and I wasn't waiting for Lone Star Financial to come collect their fraudulent debt. I was fighting back. Friday morning, I drove to Austin with a purpose that felt like preparing for combat. The shopping list in my head wasn't for retired man supplies, security cameras, audio recording equipment, and a laptop computer that had never been touched by my son's hands. Best Buy in North Austin had just opened when I walked through the doors. A young clerk with enthusiastic energy approached as I studied the surveillance section. Setting up home security, sir? Something like that, I said, paying cash for 4 wireless security cameras and a basic laptop. Nothing connected to accounts, nothing traceable through credit cards or loyalty programs. This equipment would exist outside any digital trail Garrett might be monitoring. The cameras were smaller than I'd expected, about the size of Sarah's old compact that used to sit in the kitchen windowsill. High definition, motion activated, wireless transmission to a base unit, perfect for documenting whatever conversation was coming tomorrow morning. Back home, I spent 3 careful hours installing the surveillance system. The first camera went in the living room, hidden behind the collection of family photos Sarah had arranged on the bookshelf. Pictures of Garrett's high school graduation, his wedding to Madison, holidays and birthdays when we'd all been happy and honest with each other. The second camera disappeared behind the kitchen clock, the one that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother and still chimed every hour like a church bell. From that angle, it would capture the entire kitchen table where serious family conversations always happened. The third camera tucked inside the decorative birdhouse on the deck, aimed at the sliding glass doors. If anyone tried to leave quickly, I'd have video evidence of their exit. The fourth camera I placed in my office, disguised among the fishing trophies and framed photos from construction projects. This one would record any attempts to access my compromised laptop or rifle through my personal papers. When the system came online, I tested each camera angle from the new laptop. Not a single blind spot. Every word, every expression, every gesture would be recorded in high-definition digital video, evidence that even the most expensive lawyer couldn't argue with. At 1 o'clock, I called Nolan Rivers, the attorney who'd handled Sarah's will and helped me navigate the legal maze after her death. His office was in downtown Austin, 3rd floor of a brick building that had probably been there since before I was born. Nolan, I need legal advice about recording a conversation. Texas is a one-party consent state, he said immediately. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. What's this about, Wesley? Family business. If I can get someone to admit to computer fraud, identity theft, and attempted theft, will that be admissible in court? Long pause. That's some serious allegations. Yes, recorded confessions are admissible. But Wesley, if you're talking about pressing charges against family, I need them to say 3 specific things, I interrupted, writing notes as I talked. That they installed surveillance equipment without permission, that they accessed my computer remotely without authorization, and that they attempted to use my property as loan collateral without my knowledge or consent. Those 3 admissions would support felony charges under Texas and federal law. Computer fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, we're talking about serious prison time. I wrote down the 3 points in my notebook, my handwriting shaking slightly. Sarah had always been the one to handle difficult family decisions. She would have known what to do, how to protect everyone without destroying anyone. At 2 o'clock, I called the Travis County Sheriff's Department. This is Deputy Martinez. How can I help you? My name is Wesley Palmer. My son is attempting to defraud me using surveillance equipment and computer hacking, and he's connected to a loan shark operation called Lone Star Financial. Pause. Sir, how do you know about Lone Star Financial? Because they're holding a fraudulent loan that uses my lakefront property as collateral. My son forged documents to guarantee a debt I never agreed to take on. Can you come into the station? I can't leave my property. But you can come here. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'll have recorded evidence of everything. Can you position officers at my location? Mr. Palmer, that's not our standard procedure. Deputy, he installed a GPS tracker on my truck. He's been accessing my computer remotely for months. Lone Star Financial expects payment in 48 hours, and when they don't get it, they'll come for my property with or without my cooperation. I let that sink in. You can be here tomorrow morning to arrest someone for fraud, or you can come Sunday to investigate a crime scene. I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang immediately. Mr. Palmer, this is Deputy Martinez. I need all the details you have right now. For 20 minutes, I laid out everything. The tracker, the spyware, the forged documents, the loan, the timeline. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I'll send 2 deputies tomorrow morning. They'll stay hidden unless the situation becomes dangerous. But if this goes sideways, it won't. This is still family business. It just needs to be resolved legally. Sir, what you're describing is a federal crime. If your son has done what you think he has, we're not talking about family counseling. We're talking about prison time. I understand. At 4 in the afternoon, I practiced my questions in the bathroom mirror, the same mirror where Sarah used to put on her makeup before we went to church on Sundays. She'd always said the hardest conversations required the most preparation, whether you were talking to God or your own family. Start gentle, I told myself. Give him a chance to tell the truth voluntarily. Then tighten the screws gradually until there's nowhere left to hide. Just like interrogating a structural problem. Apply pressure systematically until you find the weak point. Garrett, I said to my reflection, I found something under my truck. Too aggressive. Try again. Son, we need to talk about some things that have been happening around here. Better. Concerned father, not accusing prosecutor. I practiced for an hour, working through different scenarios, different ways Garrett might try to lie or deflect. Sarah had been good at reading people's intentions, but I'd always been better at spotting when someone was trying to cover up a mistake. 25 years of construction work had taught me that people lie most creatively when they're afraid of the consequences of truth. At 6 o'clock, I called Garrett. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I said without preamble, just you and me. We need to have a serious conversation. About what, Dad? His voice already carried that tight, defensive tone he'd used as a teenager when caught breaking curfew. About what you've been doing. And don't bring Madison. This is between father and son. Dad, I don't know what you think. 9 a.m., Garrett. Don't be late. I hung up before he could argue or ask more questions. Let him spend the night wondering exactly how much I knew, exactly what evidence I might have. Fear makes people stupid, and stupid people make confessions. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house like a ghost, touching things Sarah had touched, sitting in chairs where we'd made plans for a retirement that got cut short by cancer. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed every hour, marking time toward a confrontation I'd been avoiding for months. In my office, I opened the desk drawer where I kept Sarah's reading glasses and pulled out the letter she'd written me just before the morphine made writing impossible. I'd read it maybe a dozen times since the funeral, usually when the loneliness got too heavy to carry alone. Wesley, it began in her careful script, by the time you read this, I'll be watching you from somewhere that doesn't hurt. Take care of yourself, but more important, take care of our boy. Garrett's carrying weight he won't talk about, and Madison's illness is going to test them harder than anything they've faced. Don't let pride keep you from helping, but don't let helping turn into enabling. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. She'd written that 8 months before Garrett installed the first surveillance equipment, but somehow she'd seen what was coming. Sarah had always been better at reading the warning signs of family trouble. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the drawer. Tomorrow I'd find out if I was saving my son or destroying him, maybe both. At midnight, I walked out to the dock where Sarah and I used to sit and watch the stars reflected in the lake water. The October air was cool enough to raise goosebumps on my arms, but I stayed outside anyway, listening to the water lap against the pilings and thinking about the boy who used to fish beside me on this same dock. Garrett at 8 years old, patient as a heron, willing to sit quietly for hours waiting for a bass to take his bait. Garrett at 16, helping me rebuild the dock after a storm, learning to measure twice and cut once, understanding that good work required attention to detail and respect for the process. That boy had grown up to be a man who thought surveillance and fraud were acceptable solutions to financial problems. Somewhere along the way, I'd failed to teach him the difference between solving problems and creating bigger ones. Or maybe Sarah was right, and some lessons can only be learned through consequences. At 2 a.m, I made a pot of coffee I wouldn't drink and sat at the kitchen table where 4 generations of my family had eaten meals and made decisions. My grandfather had built this house with his own hands during the Depression, believing that a man should own something solid in an uncertain world. My father had raised me here, teaching me that honest work and family loyalty were the foundations of a decent life. Now I was about to destroy my son's life to protect what my family had built. The cameras were ready, recording equipment tested, deputies positioned. Every word of tomorrow's conversation would be documented, preserved, admissible in court. I'd built a perfect trap for my own child. At dawn, I walked through the house one more time, checking camera angles, making sure the recording equipment was functioning properly. In the living room, I straightened the family photos on Sarah's bookshelf. Garrett's graduation, his wedding, Christmas mornings when we'd all been happy and honest with each other. In a few hours, those pictures would document the last moments of our family as we'd known it. After today, everything would be evidence and legal proceedings and supervised visits in prison facilities. But Garrett had made his choices. The gambling, the surveillance, the fraud. Each decision had led inevitably to this morning, to this confrontation, to whatever happened when a father runs out of ways to protect his son from himself. I made breakfast I couldn't eat and waited for the sound of tires on gravel. At 8:55 a.m., I heard Garrett's truck coming up the driveway, engine sound familiar from 1,000 visits over the years. But this time, the sound made my hands shake. I checked the cameras one last time. Deputy Martinez and Deputy Collins were already in position behind the boathouse, invisible but ready. Everything was prepared for whatever came next. I stood up, straightened my shoulders the way Sarah always told me to do before difficult conversations, and walked toward the front door. It was time to find out what kind of man my son had become, and what kind of father I was willing to be. Garrett knocked 3 times on the front door, soft and hesitant, like when he was 7 years old and had accidentally broken one of Sarah's good dishes. Madison stood beside him, uninvited but not unexpected. In 38 years of marriage, Sarah and I had learned that Madison usually showed up when Garrett needed moral support for difficult conversations. "I said just you," I told him through the screen door. Madison's chin lifted, that stubborn gesture I'd seen 100 times during family disagreements. "This is family business, Wesley. Whatever you think Garrett's done, it affects me too." I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who'd fought cancer with more courage than most soldiers show in combat, who'd married my son when they were both too young to understand what marriage really meant. She looked tired, older than her 35 years, like someone carrying weight that wasn't entirely her own. "All right," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." They sat on the living room couch, the same couch where Sarah had read mystery novels during her good days, where we'd watched Garrett open Christmas Presents as a child. I took the chair across from them, the chair that had been Sarah's favorite spot for serious family discussions. The hidden camera behind the family photos captured every angle. Everything that happened in the next hour would be preserved in high-definition digital video, admissible in court, impossible to deny or dispute later. "Coffee?" I offered, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," Garrett said quickly. His voice cracked like it used to during his teenage years when he was nervous about asking for the truck keys. "Dad, what's this about?" I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in months. He'd lost weight since Madison's cancer treatments ended, maybe 20 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. His hands shook slightly, the way mine had shaken when Sarah was dying and I couldn't do anything to help her. "I found something under my truck," I said quietly, letting the words settle between us like stones dropping into still water. Complete silence. Garrett's face went white, all the color draining out like someone had opened a valve. Madison's hand tightened on her purse, knuckles showing white through the skin. "GPS tracker," I continued. "Professional installation, someone who knows vehicles, someone who's worked under trucks before." Garrett's breathing became shallow, rapid. Madison's eyes darted toward the sliding glass doors that led to the deck, calculating distances, maybe planning an exit route. "You taught me about truck maintenance when you were 16, son. Remember? Out in that same garage working on my old Chevy. You've been under the Silverado before. You know exactly where to mount something so it won't be seen during routine maintenance." Madison started to speak, but I held up a hand. $85,000, I said. "That's what this is about, isn't it?" Garrett made a sound like all the air had been punched out of his lungs. His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked like the little boy who used to confess to breaking windows or tracking mud through Sarah's clean kitchen. "Dad, how did you—" His voice broke completely. Madison jabbed him hard with her elbow, a sharp warning gesture I'd seen her use during family gatherings when she thought Garrett was talking too much. "I know everything," I said, my voice gentler than I felt. "The spyware on my laptop, the attempted power of attorney, the loan application using my property as collateral. All of it." Garrett's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the 8-year-old who used to cry when he caught a fish because he felt sorry for it. "Dad, they were going to hurt us. 15% monthly interest. We couldn't pay. We tried everything else first." "Garrett, shut up," Madison hissed through clenched teeth. "Let him talk," I said firmly. "This is between father and son." "The tracker was to keep you safe," Garrett said desperately, words tumbling over each other like water through a broken dam. "To know where you were, to make sure you were okay." I leaned forward in Sarah's chair, "or to make sure I'd be available when they came to collect." He hesitated, trapped between truth and lie. Both, maybe. I was scared, Dad. So scared I couldn't think straight. You put surveillance equipment on my truck and computer without telling me. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Did you access my bank accounts? My medical records? My legal documents? I just needed to know. To understand. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face like when Sarah used to scold him for fighting at school. Madison stood abruptly. We're leaving. Now. Sit down, I said quietly, or I call the sheriff right now. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photo gallery. Pictures of the tracker, screenshots of the spyware, copies of the forged documents Bryce had found. I can prove everything. Garrett broke completely, sobbing like his heart was tearing in half. Dad, please. We didn't want to hurt you. We just needed the property temporarily as collateral. We would have paid you back, I swear. After I was dead? No! He was almost shouting now. I would never hurt you. I just needed to know where you were to keep you safe from them. From who? Lone Star Financial. They said if I couldn't pay, they'd make the collateral available. I thought if I could track you, protect you somehow. Madison's control finally snapped. He didn't know they were dangerous. I told him it was just a business loan. I handled all the paperwork. She realized what she'd just admitted. Her face went pale. So you're confessing, I said quietly. You forged my signature. I didn't know they'd actually hurt anyone, Garrett cried. Madison said it was temporary just until we could figure something else out. Did you install the tracker? Yes, but I thought it was just GPS, just to keep track. Did you access my computer? Yes, but only to check your accounts, to make sure you were okay financially. Did you know about the forged signatures on the loan documents? Madison did the paperwork, but I knew about it. I should have stopped her. I should have asked you for help instead. I looked at my son, broken and crying on my couch, admitting to felonies that would send him to prison for years. I'm sorry too, Garrett. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. Deputy Martinez, I think you've heard enough. Garrett's head snapped up like he'd been slapped. What? Deputy Martinez stepped out from behind the kitchen doorway, Deputy Collins right behind her. Both officers held up their badges in the morning light streaming through Sarah's lace curtains. Garrett Palmer. Madison Palmer. You're under arrest, Martinez said in the calm, professional tone of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Computer fraud, identity theft, attempted elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit theft. Garrett didn't resist. He just sat there, crying, looking back and forth between the deputies and me like he couldn't understand how the world had changed so completely in the span of a single conversation. Dad, please, he whispered. Don't let them do this. Madison screamed, her composure finally shattered completely. This is entrapment. You set us up. You can't do this to family. Yes, I can, I said quietly. And I just did. They read them their rights while snapping on handcuffs. Garrett submitted like a beaten man, shoulders slumped, no fight left in him. Madison kept screaming about lawyers and family loyalty and how I'd destroyed my own son for money. Through the living room window, I watched them load Garrett into the back of the sheriff's cruiser. He turned to look at me one last time through the rear window, tears streaming down his face, mouth moving like he was trying to say something I'd never hear. I didn't wave goodbye. The house felt impossibly quiet after they left. Deputy Martinez stayed behind to take my statement, collecting the cameras, downloading the video evidence that would send my son to prison. The district attorney will want to meet with you next week, she said, packing up the surveillance equipment in evidence bags. This case is going to move fast. The evidence is overwhelming. What happens to them now? Arraignment Monday morning. Given the amount of money involved in the federal computer crimes, they'll likely be held without bail. She paused at the door. Mr. Palmer, you did the right thing. These people would have killed you if they thought it would solve their problem. After she left, I sat alone in my living room for the first time in 4 years, since Sarah's funeral when the house had been full of neighbors and relatives trying to help me figure out how to live without her. Now I had to figure out how to live without my son. 6 months later, I was sitting on my deck with Scout, a 3-year-old chocolate lab I'd adopted from the county shelter. The dog had belonged to an elderly woman who died alone, and something about that story had broken my heart enough to bring him home. It was May, Texas. Wildflowers blooming along the shoreline, the lake warm enough for the bass to start their spring feeding. Scout barked at a fish jumping near the dock, tail wagging like he thought he could catch it from 30 feet away. In my hand was Garrett's 6th letter from Huntsville State Prison. The first 5 sat unopened in my desk drawer, along with Sarah's reading glasses and the power of attorney documents that had started this whole nightmare. This letter felt different somehow, heavier. I thought back to January, when Garrett had stood before Judge Harrison in an orange jumpsuit, 25 pounds thinner than when I'd last seen him. When the judge sentenced him to 3 years in state prison plus supervised probation, Garrett had nodded acceptance. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, and for the first time since his arrest, he looked like the boy I'd raised instead of the desperate man who'd tried to steal my life. Madison had fought her charges, claimed she was an innocent victim of her husband's gambling addiction. The jury hadn't bought it. 2 years plus financial restitution. She'd screamed at me leaving the courthouse. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed your own family for money." But it hadn't been about money. It had been about survival. Lone Star Financial had been raided by federal agents 2 weeks after Garrett's arrest. 12 people indicted, millions of dollars in fraudulent loans exposed. Garrett's testimony as part of his plea agreement had helped bring down an operation that had been terrorizing elderly property owners across 3 states. My lakefront property was safe now, locked in an irrevocable trust that couldn't be touched by future scams or family emergencies. Scout had his own section of the dock where he liked to lie in the morning sun, watching for the ducks that nested in the reeds near the shore. I joined an elder abuse support group at the community center, gave talks at senior centers about warning signs and protection strategies. 4 families had contacted me afterward, recognizing the patterns in their own situations before it was too late. It felt good to help people avoid the choice I'd been forced to make. My phone rang. Unknown. Dallas number. "Mr. Palmer, this is Colton Brooks. I found your number through an elder abuse forum. I found something under my car yesterday, GPS tracker. My daughter's been asking about power of attorney, wanting to help with my finances. I knew this story. I'd lived this story." "Colton, don't panic," I said, watching Scout chase a butterfly across the deck. "Document everything. Get a lawyer. Check your computer for remote access software. Don't confront anyone until you have all the evidence. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." I looked out at the lake where Sarah and I had planned to spend our golden years together, where I now lived alone with my dog and my memories and the knowledge that I'd chosen survival over sentiment. 6 months ago, I was exactly where you are now. You're not paranoid. You're not imagining things. Trust your instincts and protect yourself first. It's not selfish. It's survival. We talked for 15 minutes. I gave him Nolan Rivers' phone number and Bryce Coleman's contact information. When I hung up, I felt lighter, like some of the weight of what I'd done had been transferred to something useful. I opened Garrett's letter. His handwriting was steadier now, more mature. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. Prison is hard, but I needed to be here. The counseling helps. I understand what I did now and why you had to stop me. You didn't fail as a father. I failed as a son. You were right to turn me in. It probably saved both our lives. I love you. Garrett." I read it twice, folded it carefully, and put it in my shirt pocket next to Sarah's final letter. Maybe someday I'd drive to Huntsville for a visit. Maybe not. Today wasn't that day. People ask if I regret turning in my son. The answer is no. The alternative was letting him destroy us both. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when those consequences break your heart. Scout nudged my hand for attention. "At least you're honest, boy." The Texas sky stretched endless and blue above my lakefront home. I was 62 years old, alone but alive and free, living on my own terms because that's what I'd fought for. Not revenge, not punishment, just the right to keep living.